Pastor Gooden. All right, looking at some of y'all coming in now. Oh, hold on. Hold on. There go it. Corey, what's going on? I'm seeing some of y'all coming in right now. Of course, it would be. I'm seeing some of y'all coming in right now. What's going on, Corey? There go my baby, Jamila Gooden. So listen, while y'all coming in, this is my original music. What's going on, Corey? So I decided, I said, you know what I'm gonna do? I say I give him a little something because of the subject matter today. Let's see. Can y'all hear that? You hear that? LaFonda, Alfred, Carlos, what's going on? I don't know how good y'all gonna be able to hear this, but check this out. It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you, crept you, slept on you, man. I'm so fair weather. Wish I could make it better, but let me pen this letter in the hopes that you see my life is different. I should have been a better friend to you. They're bumping that girl and smoking sticky with you. We was bumping the girls and smoking sticky with it. Now you're dead and gone, no extensions for you. What y'all think? Little more? Let me see. Should have been a better father to you. In the house, but not there. I cared, I swear, but had no father figure. No way to count the numbers. My math was elemental. My equations off. I'm feeling so resentful. Walking through my sessions in the living room. I'm the reason you smoke. That's what I pass to you. I never meant to do it. My demons pass like fluid. Now you. All right. Let me leave y'all alone. How y'all doing today? I just wanted to tease y'all just a little bit. Corey, what you say about it? All right. So listen, this is Pastor Fred Gooden, God's man on deck. And I just wanted to mess with y'all a little bit today. Listen, the subject matter today is so important because of the way that I even just played with a talent or played with my talent. The subject matter is important. I wanted to talk about today as men, and the subject matter in the caption, it says, I am who God says I am. I am who God says I am. And a lot of times when we're dealing with men, and whether you are, and if you're seeing this right now, I want you to go and get your sons. I want you to go and put your sons in there. Put some of your uncles, your fathers. Go ahead on and let them know. Listen, tonight I guarantee you it's gonna speak to us as men. I guarantee you, because a lot of cases we don't understand what's going on with men. We don't understand, and a lot of time, even as men, we don't understand what's going on with us ourselves. All right. So the subject matter that I wanted to deal with tonight is this, and it deals with me personally, and it deals with men, because a lot of times as men, we don't know. But I had to come to the conclusion for myself that I am who God says I am. Now, this is the thing about it. Now, a lot of times men go through a lot of struggle starting off as teenagers because they don't have an identity. Now, and I'm not saying this is not the same for women, but for men, identity is so important. Identity says who I am. And what if as a boy, I don't know who I am? What if as a man, I really don't know? So when you go into quote unquote ghetto, or you go into quote unquote low income areas, you see a group of people, and a group of, especially the men, you see them having a hard time with identity. They have a hard time with identity. And a lot of times we see a break in the way that they act. We see a break in we see them getting into crime. We see them getting into all kinds of things. And it's because identity. And they don't know who they are. That's why I got to build up to I am who God says I am. Because when it comes down to it, a lot of men, young men and older men, have no idea. So how do we identify myself? When I begin to look at this whole subject matter, I had to go back to when I was a teenager. I had to go back because I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I grew up in University Plaza. University Plaza was considered one of the worst projects that you could stay in. So at the age of 13 and 14 years old, I could only identify what was around me. So what was around me? I had to identify with drug dealers because that was around me. I had to identify with drug addicts because that was around me. I had to identify with the environment that I was in. And until somebody can show you what you're actually supposed to be, or what you're supposed to look like, it's hard to always have an identity. The one thing about identity is you have to, especially when you're dealing with a son or dealing with a young man, you got to find out what they have been identifying with so that you can even start to try to heal anything. Again, before I crank up and get all the way in here, I want to always acknowledge the best wife. She calls me the best husband. I call her the best wife. You know why? Because she's the best thing for me. She is my Eve. I want to acknowledge my wife, Jamila Gooden. Amen. And some of y'all men ought to start, and I'm going to just throw this out here. Some of y'all ought to have some pictures of you and your wife on Facebook instead of you being the only one seen in all your posts. I'm just saying. That might be a little bit of shade. I just threw a little bit of shade. But yeah, you ought to have your wife on some of your posts. You ought not to be the only one. It kind of says something. You the only one you see all the time. I'm just saying. But back to this. Listen. Identity is important for a man. And a lot of times we think because we've left the situation and we've left the situation that we came out, that some of us know our identity. I started out a certain way, just throwing around some lyrics, some original music, just playing with it because you can't identify that with me. That is not identifiable with the man that I just heard teaching. That's not identifiable with the man that I heard preaching. That's not identifiable with the man that I heard prophesying. That's not identifiable. I can't identify him like that. And that is the thing that have locked us into places and positions that we ought not be in because we have been identified wrong. As young men, when you're dealing with young men and you're dealing with problems, you got to find out what to identify. Because when I went back to how I came up, I could only identify with what was around me. And I had to try to live up what was around me because of what was around me. And I'm not just talking about, and listen, I'm just being 100% real about it. I seen this guy pull up and he is, and listen, this is not where I'm at. This was my truth at that time. So at that time, in Jacksonville, in which, you know, we're semi-country people. That's just what it is. So at that time, this guy pulls up with a 64 Impala, and it was on trues and bowls at that time. Some of y'all probably don't remember that. It was on 30s and cuts. It depends on how you hear it. But the inside of his car was peanut butter leather. And his headrest was Louis Vuitton. Now, listen, to a young man that's looking at that, that looks like something that I need to be. That looks like something that I can identify with and something that I need to be a part of. So we can look at some people sometime and say, why did that happen to them? But what happens is a person sees what they identify. So for a young 16-year-old boy to see a candy-coated painted car, and you know the paint costs $7,000, and see 30s and cuts on the car, and you know the 30s and cuts cost about $5,000, and to see peanut butter leather and Louis Vuitton headrest, and to know that the interior costs about 15 or 20 grand, and to see wood grain steering wheel, and to know that costs a couple of $100, and to then hear a radio system. Now we'll say, well, that is super ghetto, but at the same time, you identify with what gives you value. That's what you identify with. You identify with what gives you value. So what now? When after now I graduated and I come from out of this mentality, and now I'm launched into this world, because just to be honest, I never went to that level in the game like that. I touched it. I went to some deeper levels, but I never let myself get so far out there that I lost myself. So I stayed at a moderate place, and I thank God I didn't, because I probably would not be here. But so when I get saved, now watch this, I never had an identity while I was out there, because there was nothing really that was real to me that I identified with. So because I never became, in my city was a Henry man. I don't know what your city was. In our city, the biggest kingpin was Henry man. That's who it was. That's at that time. And I don't know how it is now. I don't know what it comes to when it comes to where you from, or what your kingpins was, or what they named, but never made it to that level. So when I switched and I gave God my life, watch this, I can no longer identify with the thug. I can no longer identify with the drug dealer. I can no longer identify with the man that was in the streets. So now again, I'm having to find identity again. And I don't want to push too fast, because now there are a lot of you have a lot of young men right now, your sons, your nephews, that you don't understand why they see what they see. And we as grown people would say, well, what God dog? You know what? I don't see why they looking at this list. And you got to remember how you was when you was young. Huh? Yeah, somebody say drop top. You gotta remember how it was when you was young. And you got to know that, no, the language might be different, but the lust still the same. The language might be different, but the lust still the same. Your son, your nephew, some of the men still looking for identity. And they can't find identity. What's going on, KD? They can't find, what's up, Van? See, Brian, I see you. They can't find identity, so they're still watching, and they're still looking, and they're trying to become something that they'll never become, because they can't find identity. Yeah, that's some of the problem. So now look at this, because I'm going somewhere. You got to catch this, because I know that a lot of brothers that do come on here, you in the faith, you in the cloth, you up under the blood. I get it, but we got to try to grab the ones that are not up under the blood. Let me say this as a segue point. Just because somebody don't call you apostle or pastor, man, don't get caught up with that. They call me Big Unc. That's what they call me. Young men see me, they say, "What up, Big Unc?" Or they say, "What up?" Or they say, "What up, Unc?" Or they say, "What up? What up, old school, whatever." You can't get stirred up by the language. But if they welcome you, then if they welcome you like that, then you need to. That's a doorway to talk to them. You can't get stirred up with titles. You can't get stirred up with none of that stuff. We have to reach some people now, so we have to hear what they're saying so we can try to pull them out so they don't have to go through what we went through, because dig it, they're trying to find their identity. That's all it is. Young men trying to find their identity. What does a young man identify with? He identifies with he identifies with what his name is, right? He identified what his name is. That means that his identity is now first locked up into who he is as a man and who his father is. Who he is as a man and who his mother is, right? Because your identity, you're first seen in your parents. You identify yourself off of your parents, or watch this, or you disconnect your identity from them. It's depending on how you think about them or how you see them. So what happens to a young man that cannot find any identity with his parents? He disconnects from that. So then he begins to identify with his neighborhood. This is when you come up and a person says, I'm from the west side. I'm from the east side. I'm from the south side. I'm from the north side. Well, some of you that might have come in and you came up in the church world and you really never ventured into some areas, you might not have thought that was serious. But there were times when I was in the club, and there were times where I thought I was finna get into one of the biggest scuffs it is, because I was screaming West Side. It just so happened that West Side was the one overpowering the club. But if it had not been, I probably would have got dusted by all of them. But it was a part of what you had to go through. It was part of it. Why? Because my identity, because I had no identity in my father, right? And then because I really couldn't identify with my mother, then I begin to identify with my neighborhood, because my neighborhood began to give me validation. So I begin to identify. First, I was from the west side. First, I was from the north side in the plaza. Then, when I transitioned, then I identified with Lackawanna. Now I'm Highland West Side. Just like young men now, and you say, well, it's frivolous, it don't make no sense. I'm gonna tell you something. It make a whole lot of sense for them, and they will die for that, because that's what they identify with. Our jobs is to speak to them and to try to get them to listen, to show them that your identity is not in that. I know it because that was me. It was on and popping on the west side. It was on and popping in there. So I identified with that. So for the longest time, as a young man that had become a rebel, as a young man that had become thuggish, as a young man that was now out there, my identity was not in my father because I couldn't connect with it. My identity was not in my mother because I couldn't connect with it. My identity was in my neighborhood because they spoke the language. Fast forward. I'm going somewhere. Now I get saved. And my identity has been one man my whole entire youthful life, up into 27 years old. I've identified with certain behaviors. I've identified with certain neighborhoods. I've identified with all these things. But now things are changed. Now I've come up under the blood. Now I'm saved. But I'm still strange. So I come into a church. Now dig this. I'm not a man that was raised in the church. So I really I didn't have the religiosity that a lot of them had. So when I came into the church, I came into the church the same way I went into the street. I came into the church the same way I worked the streets. I was all in when I was in the streets. When I was in the streets, it was live by, die by. Did I want to die? Heck no. Do most young boys out there, or young men, or some even older men that's out there that want to? No. But they take it on because it's a part of the rules. But I transition and I come into a church, and now I come into the church with the same heart and mind that I have that I came out the streets, and now I'm live by, I'm die by in the gospel. Unfortunately, When I came in there, a lot of them folk wasn't like that. So now I'm trying to say, I'm seeing all this stuff going on, right? And I'm seeing all this titles going on. And I've said it, and I'll probably be saying it because my testimony is my first pastor. He was semi-warlock. But God covered me with the blood. My second pastor, he barely know what he was doing. The third one, he was really my teacher. And his wife, they raised me what they could, but I never found an identity, is what I'm saying, in the people that were my leaders. I found no identity in them. So I didn't know that I was still searching for identity. And a lot of you men don't understand what's going on with you. You're still searching for identity. I kept looking for years and years and years. I kept looking. 7 years done gone by. Let me back it up. 3 years done gone by. I'm still strange. 7 years done gone by. I'm still strange. Now get this, guys I did meet other men that had come out the streets, but we still wasn't alike. We still was nothing alike. Because God had fashioned me different. But I didn't know how different I was. So it was hard for me because I was trying to find identity in a church that never would accept me anyhow. Why? Because I couldn't accept myself. I didn't know who I was. So now I started out the video. I'm like, let me just play with these people. Let me go ahead on. Let me just play with some music. Because a lot of you right now, a lot of you men right now are not showing the true you. A lot of you men right now are not happy because you really don't have an identity outside of what you do. So all people know you for what you do. And sometimes what you do is not who you are. In most cases, what you do isn't fully who you are. It's almost saying just because I build houses, that's my mentality to build houses. No, that's just a talent that I have. That's just something that I do. What you have to do now, because as a young man, you had more identity as a young man than you do as an older one. I identify myself as a father. I identify myself as a husband. Let me slow down. Some of you can't identify yourself as fathers because the relationship with your child is wayward, or you really don't talk to them, but that still does not make you not a father. It just means that you need to do something to fix it. So, but it's still one of your identities, but it's not you identify with it fully because you're not connected to it. See, I identify myself as a father. I identify myself as a husband. You know why? Because 100% I'm them. 100% that's who I am. 100% I'm a father. 100% I'm a husband. 100% I'm a man. 100% I'm a preacher. But I had to be all right with it. The things that's going on with a lot of men right now is you're struggling with your identity. You're struggling with, and because there's some things that never came out for some men, sexuality wise, you're struggling because you can't. You're having a struggle with your identity because of what happened to you, and you made what happened to you about who you are, and it's not. If I let what happened to me be who I was, I'd be messed up. If I let me going through the penal system, going in and out of jail, if I let myself identify with it, but when most people came in contact with me, even as a young elder, they didn't know my education level. I could have told them I was from anywhere because I never let where I was determine who I am. I never let what I came up in determine who I was. And a lot of you women that are out there right now, you need to begin to grab hold of some of these young men. Preacher Dawson, I see you. To you, that's big ump. See, you got to begin. You got to begin to come to a position now to, if you're going to talk to those sons, you're going to talk to those brothers. You gotta start talking to them, and you just can't walk up to them. Let me make this plain. You just can't walk up and tell them, I ask them, what's your identity? Don't do that. They're not going to be able to answer that. What I'm sharing with you tonight is, I am who God says I am. That's simple. See, I would never try to be something for anyone else again. If I make you uncomfortable, because if I made you uncomfortable, man, a preacher is he rapping? If that made you uncomfortable, then you might need to check yourself. Because 9 times out of 10, if I made you uncomfortable, your identity in yourself may be off, because you might be identifying with what you do more than who you are. You got to come to the place that I am who God says I am. I am uniquely made by him. I cannot just do all things through Christ, but I am what he has made me, so that this day, whatever I do, I enjoy me in doing it. You got to come to a place that you know what is your identity? Is your identity just a preacher? Is your identity just an apostle? Because you might be living a sad lifestyle as a young man, and this is why I'm talking to a lot of you men out here. We need you to begin to reach out, because you know what happened to me. One thing I had told a lot of people, there ain't no preachers come out there where we was. There ain't no preachers come out there and share nothing. Why? Because a lot of the men are scared of the young men now. It's the truth. So this is the thing. Begin to say, I am who God says I am, with all my imperfections. In this, I am saying that you don't have to be perfect. In this, I'm saying, because when I say I am who God says, I'm saying I am who God says I am, with all my talents, with all my imperfections, with the things that did happen, with the thing I am who God says I am, fully, totally, unapologetically. And to some of you, you got to tell your sons, you got to tell your brothers, because some of you men that are struggling right now, you have a wife that knows who she is. Here we go. You have a wife that knows who she is. And you're troubled because you don't know who you are. Woo-hoo. See, because because they're secure, they're walking in it, but you don't know who you are. You have to come to a full place in your mind. And this is whether you can be a Christian or not. I'm just talking to men, period. Do you know who you are? Not do you know who you are according to your neighborhood, according to what you've done, right? Things you have done. Let me say it right. Not according to reputations that you think you got or don't have. No. Who are you? How would you describe your identity? And if you spoke and said what your identity is, could you just say after that, I am who God says I am? Because there's some things that God did not make you. Abusive, God didn't make you that. A man that cusses his wife out, or cusses his children out, or just, no, man, God ain't do that. Nah, he ain't do that. A man that steal will steal. Nah, man, God ain't do that. A man that will still hustle and do all manners of things just to get $1. Nah, man, God ain't made that. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. So it says to us, and it says to some of you men, who am I in God? Who does God say I am? And you got to question that. You got to come to that. Because now we're in a time right now, in a temperament in time right now, even as just as black men, that this ain't no time to be immature and not know who you are. This is a time to know exactly who you are, to know exactly what role you need to be playing, to know exactly how you need to be covering family, wife, children, the whole nine. This ain't no time for no identity crisis, and I'm talking about for men's men. This ain't no time for you to still be trying to act like a player, and you know them days is gone. This ain't no time for that. This is a time for men to stand up and say, I am who God says I am. And if you have some of those flaws that I did say, is that time for you to say, well, you know what, God, I know you're going to take that. I'm ready to get rid of that. I'm ready to leave that alone too. It's Pastor Fred Gooden, God's man on deck. He has some real things that he wants you. See, this is the thing about it. God really wants to do some great things and some monumental things with men. And he is. I'm telling you, the time is coming right now. There is a turning. But will you be in the mix? Or will you still be wrestling with whether I'm going to be, I'm just be real with you. Am I going to be a husband? Or am I going to just keep acting like a husband? Yeah. Am I going to be faithful? Am I getting ready to, am I going to be a faithful father? Am I going to be a faithful husband? Am I going to be a faithful man? It's because a lot of things had not turned for you because you had not decided to be faithful yet. The moment you decide to be faithful in wherever you are, that's when things begin to turn. That's why I say, I am who God says I am. Hallelujah. So, it's things I love. It's things I always do. It's things, and I'll never try to make it about the church again because I tried to pull my identity out of a church that I was never meant to identify with. I was only meant to identify with the God of the church. And some of you have lost time. You've lost time. You've lost strength because you became something that you yourself can't even identify with no more. This is Pastor Fred Gooden. Who does God say you are? If you would talk to your son, when I talked about my past, when I talked about, because some of these young men out here, exactly what I said, and even though those were the early 90s, and these are the 20s, I'm telling you right now, same thing. I'm telling you right now, they going through the same thing. They're identifying themselves by the father. They're identifying themselves more by their neighborhoods and more by their friends. This is what we got to get back to. Who does God say you are? I'm getting ready to go. But this is it. It's a time for us as men to come together. This is Pastor Fred Gooden, God's man on deck. And the bottom line is, man, you got some living to do. And in order to do the living you got to do, that means in some of these areas you know you need to fix. Man, fix them and stop making excuses for them. Don't make excuses. I tried to make excuses. I would have tried to pin it on the pastors that I came up with. I couldn't pin none of that on them. How was they going to help me find my identity and they didn't have one? To this day, I really don't know whether they was happy or not. But now I can say, I am who God says I am. Now I can say, whether I'm preaching, teaching, rapping, singing, I am who God says I am. All of those things. And until you come there, you're not complete. So I want to encourage you, some of you men, grab hold of your sons, ask them the right questions, make them think. I want to encourage you, some of you single parent women, grab hold of your sons, grab hold of your nephews, make them think. Because some of them don't even know that they're identifying themselves by their neighborhoods and by the territories and by they don't know. They just going along to get along. They don't understand what's going on right now. And some of them, when you speak to them, they're gonna be saved by it. I'm telling you, they're gonna realize, hold up. When you ask them, you mean to tell me you finna go to jail because you stay on the west side? Like, huh? What? No, I ain't finna. But that's what you're getting ready to do. Mean to tell me you're gonna do that because you stay? No, I ain't trying. Yeah, but I'm telling you what you're doing. Because a lot of, if I had somebody. Now, this is the thing about a testimony. Some things we had to suffer so that we can get the information to somebody else one day. It ain't all the time fair, but it is what it is. If you go and share some of this stuff right now with some of these young men out there, some of these young guys out there, because see now, at our age, you still got cats 45, you still got cats 50 years old. They think, they still acting like jitterbugs. They still think they can do the same old stuff they've been doing. It's just true. So you got to just share this. You can't put an age limit on it. You just got to share it. And some men, you're going to have to ask them, man, if I was to ask you a question, what's your identity? If you was to ask him a question, who does God say you are? Most of the time, if they get frustrated off the bat, it's because they don't know who they are. All right, I'm getting ready to go. This is Pastor Fred Gooden, God's Man on Deck. And we got a lot of work to do, men. We got a lot of things to do. We got a lot going on. I was just playing. I played with y'all a little bit today. But I'm going to come and hit y'all with some real stuff. Right? Do what you do. Be the man you are. But never lose yourself to a people that don't care about you. Again, this is Pastor Fred, God's Man on Deck. God bless you.